Well, greetings, everybody. Welcome once again to the Rec Poker Podcast, officially sponsored by Running Aces Casino and Racetrack. I'm your host, Steve Fredlund, excited to bring you yet another episode. First off, I want to thank Chad McVean, another great picture of him with the Rec Poker patch. Fantastic stuff, man. You look good rocking that patch, dude. Thanks for all your support, all your encouragement, and thanks to everybody else out there. I've seen a number of people wearing hats and shirts and patches, and excited to see the brand building and raising awareness, raising listenership, and that's sort of exciting as we build our community of folks that are trying to get better at this game as we go forward. I also want to give a quick shout out to Mr. Brian Soja. Brian's been on the podcast before, episode 34. We interviewed him, and Brian just brought home the trophy from the Iowa State Championship, the MSPT held down at Meskwaki Casino. $90,000 and change for Brian. Fantastic result. Just a great guy, a beloved figure in the Minnesota poker community, and just all around great dude. So shout out to Brian on that deal. I continue to talk to people about this huge correlation between people that show up on the podcast, contribute to the podcast, and then win tournaments. So at some point, I'll have to do some sort of a statistical regression analysis to find out if there's really something to it. But it does seem that there does seem to be a pretty high correlation, or maybe we're just getting the best players in the world on the podcast. I don't know which it is, but it's been fun to see some of the results for some of the folks that have been on the podcast. And speaking of the podcast, another great month for us. Once again, we set a record for the number of plays. So thanks again to all of you who are supporting and encouraging what we're doing here. The best thing you can do is like an episode, rate us, review us on iTunes, share us, follow us on Twitter at Rec Poker, join the Facebook group Rec Poker, and also contribute to the discussion, raise questions, dialogue out there. It's fun to build this community of like-minded people. So thanks again, and let's keep it going as we go forward. I have a few more interviews scheduled. Today we're going to be chatting with Kenna James. My buddy Stacey Nelson and I sat down to chat with Kenna. And also next week, Sherry Bukowski, who is the author of The Kaizen of Poker. That's an exciting interview I'm excited to share with you. And then there's a few more that are in the works. But hopefully by the end of September, early October, we're going to get back to some specific strategy pieces and getting input from a number of players, professional and recreational players. And I'm just super excited about this because my plan is to really have this community of people help me build my own personal strategy, starting with focusing on hand ranging and going from there. And I'm going to use myself as a guinea pig and really try to say, how do I build a strategy from scratch? And I think a lot of great insights are going to come along the way. Even if you already have your strategy, you already have your ranges, I think the insights that we get along the way are going to be huge. But for somebody like me, who's never really formally built a strategy, I'm excited to see where this goes. So we're going to have some of the greatest minds in the poker world contributing to this. And so I think it's going to be some fantastic episodes coming forward once we get through these interviews, which new ones keep coming up, and I want to take advantage of it when they come up. So some great folks and then some great poker strategy will be coming as well. So with that, as I mentioned, Stacey Nelson and I today chat with Kenna James. Many of you know him from the Heartland Poker Tour. He was also the runner-up to our very own Mike Schneider when Schneids won the $1 million in the Party Poker Cruise Tournament several years ago, which was part of propelling Mike to the Minnesota Poker Hall of Fame. So we're going to hear a word from Running Aces, who continues to sponsor us, and thanks to you guys for all your support and encouragement and all the co-branding that we do together on merchandise. It's fantastic. So we're going to hear from those guys, and then when we come back, you will hear the interview that Stacey and I did with Kenna James. Running Aces Casino and Racetrack has the best poker room in Minnesota, featuring 24/7 promos on all cash poker games, including earning $2 per hour in comps, plus the most player-friendly tourney structures. Visit runaces.com for daily promotions and the tournament calendar. Running Aces Casino and Racetrack, the official sponsor of Rec Poker. All right, everybody, as promised, here with Kenna James. Super excited. Kenna, first of all, my buddy Stacey and I are here. We're excited to hear what you have to say, but just first of all, thanks for taking the time, your day off, and spending a little bit of it with us.
You're welcome, Steve, Stacey. Nice to meet you guys and be introduced to your audience.
Yeah,
you guys represent the base of our poker community and what all poker rooms around the world are based on, which is not just the high level players and the Phil Ivies and the Dan Negreanos, the people that reach pinnacles and stuff like that. But the base of the mountain is all of us enthusiasts, the 60 million people that play and love this game around the world. So it's I've climbed the journey. In many ways, I'm still on it myself. So it's great to be here with you guys and your audience.
I appreciate that. Well, tell us a little bit about, I guess, where you're calling in from, but then also, how did you even get introduced to this game?
Wow. Well, I'm calling in from Las Vegas, Nevada, one of the poker I call it the poker capital of the world, between here, LA. I think maybe Florida's up and coming are the three, main points of the games. Love it here right now. It's the poker mecca, as everybody from around the world is traveling here from the World Series of Poker. I'm playing in the main event, the $10,000 event. I made it into day 2. But how did I get here? And it's been quite a journey. I started out in a small town in Michigan of 13,000 people. And my first poker game I remember, I played in a garage with my buddy's dad and his Army buddies. I was 13 years old. These guys were all old guys, and we were playing nickel, dime, quarter in a game called Guts. And my friend was in the house. I'm playing out with these guys, with my paper route money. And that's how I started. And I just had a natural competitiveness in me. My brother and sisters are older. And so I was always trying to get attention and fight, to compete with them. And so I just had that natural instinct of wanting to compete and wanting to be better. And then from there, I didn't play again till maybe 1995, 96. I was 32 years old, which is a dinosaur in today's world.
Right.
But I was a young gun in those days. The average age was probably 50 back then. There's still smoky poker rooms and things. And I started playing at Hollywood Park Casino, $1 and $2 limit hold'em poker. And my first book I read was Hold'em for Advanced Players by David Skolansky and Mason Melmoth. And I started playing $20 tournaments at Hollywood Park Casino. And I first started traveling to Lake Elsinore, which was like 50 miles away, because they had the best structured tournaments. $100 buy-in tournament was really huge. I played a $200 event, or $300 was the main event. And I remember playing with Alan Cunningham for the first time, 1996, I think it was. And I finished third in that tournament, and he ended up winning it. It was amazing. And everybody was around then. The Grinder was around in LA at that time, all these big names, and they were all sweating it out, playing $1, $2, $20, $100 buy-in tournaments.
So you just kind of, you started small, you took a gap. Now you've been sort of building as you go, and you've entered, bigger and bigger tournaments as you go. And now you're playing fully professionally, or is this what you do?
I played fully professionally since, I guess since 2000 or 2002.
Okay.
I haven't had another job for the last.
Yeah, well, I guess we see on the HBT a lot. So you're doing some broadcasting, you're doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I broadcast.
It's always around poker.
I have those things too, but as far as playing, I've done playing full time since I'd say 2000.
Well, it's been fun to watch on the HBT. I love having, it seems like a good match. You and James seem like a good fit as far as, entertainment, as well as some of the strategy pieces. And I know you're only giving us a few of the hands. We see very little of the final table, but
right.
Appreciate what you bring to the table there, and we learn a bit, even though we recognize that we're just seeing some of the TV hands, as it were. I do want to ask you one question about one of your past tournaments. I know your biggest score, at least on the Hendon Mob, is the $700K in the party poker, and I'm actually gotten to know pretty well the guy who bested you there, and so I'm curious, Mike Schneider, who was just a young punk at the time, and I'm curious what you recall from that tournament, and sort of how that felt to kind of score that big pretty early on in your career, I think.
It was tremendous. It was a tremendous feeling and a great accomplishment in my career. And Mike Schneider, by the way, I played with him. I'm not sure if it was a 4 or 5 day tournament, but on day 3 or day 4, he was really short stack. I played with him most of the day. Matter of fact, I had him all in once, and he escaped. He had a better hand. He escaped another time, and he just kept building. And he's just such a great player, disciplined, strategist, really knows the game. And he just kept propelling. And I knew he was going to be, my toughest opponent. And sure enough, and by the time we got to the final table, there was just no stopping him. And when we got down to 3-handed, in fact, I was the lowest in stack, and the other guy fell victim of getting involved with him too often and allowed me to sneak into second place. So when we got to heads up, he had almost an insurmountable lead.
It's interesting. I've interviewed him a few times for the show. He's a Minnesota Poker Hall of Famer now. He's just a great dude. And I asked him about his early career, and he says one of the hands that actually made him realize that he was going to make it as a poker player was against you in that tournament, and it was actually a hand that he lost. I don't remember the details of it, but it was a hand where he said at the end of the day it broke down where he was betting when he had it, and then he gave it up once you got there, and he sort of said that was the time where he realized that he could actually play this game, even though it was a hand that he lost, which I think is a great testament to his understanding of the game, not just being results oriented.
You mean how he dealt with the hand he lost?
Well, no, I remember. I don't remember all the details of it, but it was just, him. He knew that he was ahead, or that his read was that he was ahead, and he was betting. And then I don't know if you check raised the river, or you raised him on the river or whatever, and he got away from it. And somehow he knew that you actually had it, or maybe he went to showdown, right, and slowed down or something. But it was actually the result of the hand was you took a nice pot off of him, but as he broke down the hand. And he realized, I was actually making the right decision on every street. He said that was when he started realizing that, maybe
that's wonderful.
Isn't that great? It's not a result oriented.
It's great, actually, and that's what really breeds confidence in players is being able to take your own direction, follow your instincts and your intuition, let go of I got to win this hand, or I've got to do this, or I'm supposed to do that. But being able to follow your own direction and knowing what direction to take, and him being able to do that and realizing, hey, I'm in control. I'm in control of this. I can do this. Is a wonderful moment to have as a professional. It's really what crosses the chasm from amateur to professional, when you prove to yourself, not to anybody else, that you have the ability to do what you need to do in order to survive.
That's really well said. So I'm thinking about your time, obviously, as a player, your time on the HPT, watching all of these final tables. And, I don't know how much you watch and how much is post-production editing or all that, but I'm curious sort of your take as you're watching these final tables. Do you just kind of know right away, like, which players are going to be the players to beat based on how they approach the game? Because I know clearly some of those final tables are pretty aggressive. Some of those are pretty passive. You see some people making folds that you're kind of like, really, I'm surprised by that. Or some pretty loose calls. I'm just kind of curious, as you're watching it unfold, or however that looks, whether you're playing or commentating, do you just kind of know, which players are going to be the ones that to reckon with, and what is it that separates them, or what are those traits that you recognize?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yes, the answer to your question is yes. Immediately, we call it profiling your opponents. See, just like in the animal kingdom, you want to know who's the sheep and who's the wolves, and who are the rodents. Who's going to be roadkill, who's going to destroy themselves, who's going to be the toughest to contend with. So, absolutely, you need to do that. When I'm watching it, I'm more of a spectator, so I can tell, but it's not. It's just more for entertainment value. I kind of get an idea who's going to win and who's not even before I see it, or who's going to do well. But there's always surprises. That's why the game we play, there's suckouts. There's things that happen during the game that make people believe anyone can win. And that's true. Anyone can win any given tournament. Right. But in the long run, who's going to survive?
Right.
Who's going to continue to survive 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road? And now to the specifics of your question, what do I look for? The first thing is mechanics. How do they handle their chips? How do they handle their body? How do they sit at the table? Do they show emotion during a hand? Are there betting tells? what are their standards and values? Meaning, what are they willing to bet into a 4-player field? Some people will bet any pair. Some people will bet only top pair or better. Some people, if it's a 4-way pot and it's a dry board, will only bet, top pair, top kicker. Other players are betting, second pair into a 4-player field. And they're not the pre-flop raiser, and you're thinking, wow, this person's really wide, or they're loose,
Mm-hmm.
And so that's their standards, or what they value, what they think. And a lot of times poker is a game or a competition of standards and values, right?
Yeah.
So you judge or profile a person based on those values, how loose they are, how tight they are, what they're going to invest their money with. And so the more solid someone is, meaning what they're willing to bet with and continue with, and be correct on that, determines a lot on the strength of the player.
And so obviously you're only going to encounter certain situations. You're not going to encounter everything over one final table. But what I'm hearing is, you see somebody do a certain thing with second pair, and you can sort of extrapolate that to saying, well, they're probably going to be generally, looser, tighter, whatever that might be. And so a different situation arises. You have this general feeling for that player. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, let's look at a specific example. Let's say you have ace-8 of spades in the big blind. Okay.
Yep.
And let's find out what kind of player you are.
Oh.
And
let's make Stacey do this.
Position, and there's a raise in middle position and 2 callers, and you complete out of the big blind.
Yep.
All right. And the flop is queen 8-5 with 1 spade.
Yeah.
Now you're first to act, and you got 3 people left behind you. How do you proceed? Check or bet?
Yeah, I'm generally going to be in check call mode there, probably.
Okay. So a lot of players. So that's more standard. Okay, that would be standard. Would be check. Yeah. But let's say it goes, you check, and it gets checked to the last player, who now makes a bet. What's your play? Call, fold, or raise?
Yeah, depending on stack size, I'll probably be tempted to raise there.
Okay, which is kind of a limit hold'em strategy to kind of thin the field and protect your hand a little bit.
Well, yeah, it's a little bit of protection. I think it's also, I want to discourage those others from staying in there with a gut shot. I also want to, think the player that's last to act is probably fairly wide there. They might just be taking a stab at it much more than the pre-flop raiser or the person in second position.
Right. So in limit hold'em, it's absolutely a raise, and no limit, it's questionable to raise. Right. If you raised in that spot a lot of times, I would consider you a pretty loose player.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be tempted to raise.
I'll tell you why, because if I'm in the middle there and I have like a hand if I'm last act, if I have like a queen 10 or queen jack, a lot of times I'm checking that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep.
So anyway, so that's just, that tells me a little bit about you, right? I'm like, wow, this guy really values second pair into a 4-player field.
Right.
And so now that's going to give me a line on you, and I'm going to play you probably more aggressively than I would somebody who's only going to raise there with ace queen or better.
Yeah, that's the tricky part for me, because, in that spot, I'll generally just check call with second pair top kicker. But, my read isn't so much that I value second pair a lot as much as it is, boy, the first 2, probably didn't have top pair. They probably would have let out. And the last guy, I'm just thinking might be taking a stab depending on the type of player he is. So that's where I always get, to me, it gets a little bit tricky. Like, do you read me as somebody who's overvaluing second pair, or somebody who's advanced enough to know that, this guy could just be taking a stab with nothing and I'm playing a player? How do you differentiate?
Well, I'm reading it as you're overevaluating second pair. Whereas if you would call, you're protecting your equity against somebody who's bluffing, and you want to see what's going to happen with the 2 people in between.
Right. Pick up a spade draw or something as well on the turn, or Yeah.
And just see, maybe you'll hit an 8 on the turn. Maybe it'll get raised and re-raised behind you by the other people, and you can easily get away from your hand.
Right.
Maybe they'll both fold, and you'll see a turn and a blank will come. Now what do you do?
Yeah. Right.
You know,
Yeah. And that's
or maybe a bluff card comes. I said Queen 8-5, right?
somewhere in there. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe it comes off a 7.
Right.
And now you decide to represent 8-7.
Right.
And now you lead in, right?
Right.
So now you're accomplishing the same thing what you did before with a raise on the flop, but now you're leading in on the turn. So if he's bluffing, you protect your equity.
Yep.
You see? Yep. And you're representing 8-7, where now if he doesn't have the queen, he's just going to give it up. And you didn't give yourself the additional risk of putting that raise in with action behind you.
Right.
So it's a much more solid play.
Okay.
Than raising with 2 people behind you with second pair and guessing whether the guy has a queen or not.
Right. And so it goes to showdown, and you see that, either I played more solidly or I overvalued second pair. You see that, you make a mental note of that, and then that's just something that in future hands you're able to kind of pull back out and say, okay, yes, I remember that situation.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. So now if you were the first guy that raised, and let's say I was in the middle and I just folded because I had ace jack of clubs.
Right.
And now I think, oh, this guy will check raise with second pair on the board.
Okay.
You see what I mean?
So you put that one away.
Now gives me your standard there. So that's going to allow me to call and bet a lot wider against you.
Yep. Okay.
Whereas if you just called and then you either check call turn or, whatever, and I got to showdown and I saw your hand, I go, oh, he's solid and he protects his equity in the hand.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say you called all the way down. All right. And then the guy turns over king, queen. He checks the river though. And now you turn over ace 8 and he turns over king, queen. Right. Okay. Maybe he makes a really weak value bet on the river and you call it. I go, oh, this guy's a calling station.
No, a calling station. Right. It's a fine line between solid and calling station, and right.
Yeah, he's really interested in protecting his equity here.
Right.
But sometimes it's okay to just check call flop and then give up on turn.
Right.
If you don't improve. Okay. But there's call down artists. We call them the ATM.
Right.
Always pays out.
Oh, for sure. Exactly.
So remember how you play your hand and the actions you take determine who you are.
Yeah. And so are you capable of remembering sort of all of those situations and bringing them up in the course of the future hands, or is it some sort of a framework where you just make a mental note, oh, this guy overvalues his equity? Or, I mean, how do you, over the course of, say, you're playing with somebody for an entire day or a 2-day or 3-day tournament, I mean, are you actually mentally capable of recalling those situations, or are you somehow labeling people in some method that allows you to have to remember specifics?
It's a great question. I generalize more and kind of put people in categories. So some hands I'll remember, but I'm not as good as an Ivy who probably remembers every hand he ever played. They have photographic memories. I'm not like that. I kind of get a feel for a person and then categorize them,
Yep.
Whether tight, loose, aggressive, passive aggressive.
And then you're able to extrapolate that into other different situations and say, how might a person like this be acting in this situation?
And I put it in other situations, and then I develop counter strategies. Yeah. Let's say, for an example, I've got a passive-aggressive opponent, meaning they like to check and raise a lot, right? Yep. They show weakness or feign weakness, and then they show strength. So I need a much bigger hand to bet when I'm in position against that player. Mm-hmm. Because a proper counter strategy against that is to mirror them. So when they check, I check. Unless I have I have a hand that can withstand a check raise. When they bet, I call. You see?
Okay.
Because when they're bet, they tend to be weaker because they're passive aggressive. They like to check and raise. So when they bet, they tend to be weaker. So against the passive aggressive, the person who's always trying to throw you off balance by taking an opposite action, I then mirror that. So when they check, I check. When they bet, I call.
Okay.
You see?
Yep. So, and that a lot of that, I assume, and part of it's just experience, but part of that, I assume, is this is the work you do off the felt that a lot of the recreational players maybe aren't doing, is actually intentionally thinking through, what are my counter strategies? How do I play against somebody like this?
Exactly right.
So,
how do you play? Let's say for your audience, which comes up a lot, right? Which is, I get in my coaching, right? A player goes, well, I'd rather play against really good players. I can't beat the idiots. I can't beat the fish. They don't know what they're doing.
Right.
I get that all the time. Listen, it's first of all, it's phony baloney. If you can't catch a lamb, you're not going to be able to catch a wolf. It's just not going to happen. I'm sorry, you're fooling yourself. All right, you got to learn how to beat the weak before you can beat the strong. And what they really mean is they play better with predictability than unpredictability. Right. Because a lot of times the weaker players don't know where they're at. So how can you know where they're at? Well, the simple counter strategy to that is you just play straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you bet when you have it, you check when you don't. And the value you get is there oftentimes a weak player is not betting when they should be betting, right? They're calling when they should be folding, right? So they give up free cards. And so when you are against a weak player trying to get them to fold because you have a marginal hand and they're calling you with bottom pair, you're the one that's the idiot. You know?
I can't believe you called all the way down with that, right?
Take it. You know? That's
we've all been there because I'm bigger.
Realizing taking the free card and making a hand before you bet it. And then when you bet it, you can bet heavier because they call lighter.
Right.
But a lot of players make the mistake. Well, I want to push them out of the pot. I want to push them. And they keep calling me. Well, there's a higher philosophy that in this world that what you resist persists. So the more you try to prevent something from happening, the more it tends to happen. So they shouldn't be trying to push people out of pots. First of all, you should be trying to get value for your hand.
Right.
So why am I pushing them out? You should be wanting them to call.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's interesting because
mindset is incorrect.
That's so good, and I think that's where I think you couple that with the whole results-oriented thing too, where one of the things that we talk about a lot on the podcast is trying to help people get over this being results-oriented because they'll say, this idiot called me all the way down. I was ahead until the river, and then he spiked on the river, and the reality is you want them to call. I mean, you got exactly what you want.
Sometimes you do. Sometimes you want to make a shutout bet, but then your bet wasn't big enough. Why don't you just move in?
Right.
Well, the pot was 500. Yeah, move in 10,000. See if he calls you. No, you bet 2,000. You overbet the pot, but he still called.
Right.
Well, the reason they get frustrated is they don't accomplish. Remember, success is accomplishing your intention. So they make a bet intending the guy to fold, but he calls. So your bet wasn't big enough.
Right. But the reality is, if we knew exactly what they had, we'd want them to call all day. In a lot of these situations anyway, the ones that I'm referring to is people are complaining about somebody hitting a river when would you, the question I was asking is, well, if you knew what they had, would you actually want them to fold the turn? Well, no, I want them to pay me off. I just don't want them to hit the river. Well, unfortunately, that is part of the game.
But here's the secret. Inside of all that is the reason. It's not like you manufacture the card, but your opponent can sense when you want them to do something, and they tend to do the opposite. They sense you want them to fold. So they call you. Stop projecting that energy. You're projecting the energy. Here, I want you to lay down because you're trying to win the pot. Stop. Success is in the journey, not the destination.
All right, Kenna James. And how do we stop projecting that? Coach James, what do we do?
Realizing you're not in control of the river. You're not in control of the cards that come out. All you're in control of is your intention and your action. So first of all, start with changing your intention. My intention shouldn't be to try and push a player out of the pot most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time. It should be to either get value for your hand, meaning to charge them the highest price that they will still call when you have the best hand. If you're trying to make a bluff and get them out of the pot, that's a different story. Then just make a bigger bet. And if it doesn't work, then you're trying to bluff the wrong person. You should never try to bluff a calling station. That's a concept that people miss. Well, I was making a bluff. The guy is a caller. You should never bluff the sheriff. You're going to end up in jail.
A little bit like Scott Blumstein, who at the main event or whatever last year said, I don't know if you know this, but I'm not much of a folder.
You got it. So you shouldn't try to bluff this guy. Right. So people who don't fold or people who are only thinking of their own hand, you're trying to get them to represent your hand, right? So level 2 is, what does he think I have? A lot of players don't even think on level 2. They're only thinking, hey, I've got an ace. You called me with ace high? What are you thinking? I'm thinking I got an ace. Well, what do you think I have? They don't get to that level.
Right.
I've got a pair. You see?
I do, yeah.
So you got to play at the level of your opponent and win at that level.
So let me ask you
can
this.
think at a higher level, but you got to meet your opponent at the level they're at and defeat them at that level.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I think one of the things that I think several of us struggle with is sometimes it just feels like there's so many things to remember. One of the things that you're referring to is, what player types are you in the pot against? But I also have to remember, what are my chip stacks? What stage of the tournament are we in?
Yes.
All of these, what's my range? What's their range? What do they think my range is? What do I think their range is? What's the size of the pot? What's the effective stack size? There's so many things. And, we sort of fall under the shield of, well, we're recreational players. We can't remember all of this. But, I guess I'd be looking to you for any wisdom as far as how do we integrate all of those?
How do you process it?
They seem like independent pieces of information, but we know that they all flow into one decision. Some influence us to, some would influence us to raise, some would influence us to fold. They can be competing sort of things. How do we integrate those into a decision? Is this simply a function of time and reps, or is there something that, as recreational players, we can be doing off the felt to help us? How do we balance and how do we give the right amount of weight to each of these competing factors?
Wow, that's about 20 questions.
Yeah, I know.
But let me see if I get the concept of your question. So start with concepts in general and work to the specific. Let's start with what you said. Remember that there's 5 actions a player can take throughout the play of the hand. What are they?
Well, I assume that they can check, they can fold, they can bet, they can raise. What am I missing?
You got it. That's where.
Did I get all 5?
Very good. But that's the basics, right? We're trying to get to. You're missing call, check, call, fold, bet, raise.
Okay.
All our processing is trying to get us to whatever the most profitable action to take is.
Right.
Everything, whether it's player profiling, whether it's math, whether it's pot odds, whether it's our hand value, we're all trying to process this information to get us to that one decision. So just realize that first.
Okay.
So we should consider our options. Pre-flop, I can call, raise, or fold.
Yep.
It's one of those 3. And then as poker players, our system is to use a process of elimination to check off which one, all right, calling isn't profitable here. That means I could raise or fold. Right?
Yep.
And the process that we each use is different for each one of us. But how do you do it? I would first just start with basics. In other words, I wouldn't get into player profiling. Player profiling and psychology should come last. First should just be your hand, your position, and your chip stack, and the position in the tournament if you're a tournament player. Conceptually, I know that in the beginning of a tournament, I'm going to take more risk because the chips are worth less value than they were at the end. So I just know that. So I'm more willing to take flips at the end than I am in the beginning than I am in the middle of the tournament. So just know that. That means how I'm going to play certain hands is going to just shift a little bit. You see, I'm going to be more aggressive and attacking and building a chip stack in the beginning. And in the middle, I'm going to be more protective, right? And you got to make those adaptations and those shifts. And to your specific question, how do you process all this? Just start with basics. And here's the order of priority for tournament players out there, and I'll speak to that since that's what I'm best known for. Is I would first start with chips. Chips in tournaments are your number one factor of decision making. I'm going to play different hands when I have 100,000 and the average is 25,000 than when I have 10,000 and the average is 25,000. I'm going to play different hands. Just the way it is. And the one who wins the tournament is the one who has all the chips at the end. So tournament poker is all about chip stack. So chip stack should be your first factor of consideration, even more than table position. Second would be table position. So what position am I in? Am I acting first? Am I acting last? Whatever. All right, so that's your second factor of consideration. The third should be your hand. Okay, what do I have? That's why you see people play 5-3 suited in these hands. They've got a lot of chips.
Right.
Watching, the grinder the other day, raising with deuce 3 under the gun. You know what I mean? It's a joke. He put on a clinic, man. I'm telling you. And a lot of that has to do with his image, which comes like fourth or fifth down the line. So we've got our chip stack we should consider first, our table position second, our hand position third, and our opponent, like who we're playing against, fourth. Right?
Yep.
So that's the order of priority. I would look at those and process it. And then matching that hand up to your opponents, you see?
Yeah.
And your stage of the tournament. If you gave me a specific or a semi-specific hand or situation, I could show you how I would process that if it would be helpful.
Yeah, I think we probably don't have time for that, even though I would love to talk to you for hours and hours about that. But no, that is super helpful. Just that's the kind of framework stuff I'm talking about, because, as we talk about specific hands, people are like, well, you have to consider that. Oh, you have to consider that. You have to consider that. And I get it, but it's hard to prioritize those things. And,
yeah, it is. I think, let me give you one tip for your audience that would be helpful. One of the hardest types of hands to play are your marginal, which means they're on the edge of profitability, hands like Queen Jack, King 10, and your multi-way hands like 7-8 suited, Jack 10 suited, 2 5s, 2 6s.
Right.
All these type of hands are kind of difficult to play as an amateur. Like, should I play this hand or not? I'm facing a bet. I'm facing a raise. Should I call or should I fold? All right. So basic concept there that helped me a lot in coming out and learning was this thing called the 5-10 principle, which basically says when I have pre-flop and I have a marginal or a multi-way hand and I'm facing a bet and a raise, if the bet I'm facing is 10% of the effective stack, the lowest of the two competing stacks, or more, it's a clear fold.
Yep.
Or I could raise as a bluff. And if it's 5% or less, it's a clear call. And if it's in between, I use my judgment based on my position and my opponent. So let's look at a real life example. And let me put you in it. Let's say you have, I love it, his face lights up. Oh, man, I have to put it. All right, so are you a cash game player or a tournament player?
No, just tournaments, just very little cash.
So you're in a tournament. You're in the World Series of Poker main event, okay? And you've got 50,000 chips.
Yep.
And we've just started, and the blinds are 1 in 200, and somebody raises to 500. And somebody else 3 bets to 1,500, and you're on the button with pocket nines.
Yeah. I mean, the 5-10 rule would say, well, let's go ahead and call this.
It's a clear call if you want to make
odds, right?
And play for a set value,
right?
Or you could raise for value as a premium hand, right?
Right.
If you think you want to take the lead in the pot, but that's a great guideline.
And is that basically the guideline? Is there basically because 10%? It's really an implied odds play that if you're putting in 10% of your play, it's just you're not getting the right implied odds versus less than 5%. You are. Is that really what it comes down to?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
That's right.
So you're 8-7 suited. If you're going to win a pot that's 100 big blinds or 200 big blinds,
right? And you only need to hit it 1 out of 20 times, right?
Right. Okay. Oh, that's really good.
So and there's parameters like maybe if it's towards the middle of the tournament, it means a little less than 5%, maybe 4 or 3% of my stack. But it's just nice to have a guideline. So when I pick up those hands and I'm facing those situations, say, well, should I even get involved here or not?
Yeah.
The closer it is to 10, the more you should either just get out or make a move with a bluff and raise.
Right.
But you can't call.
Well, one of the things I really like about that is just, as somebody who doesn't normally play for 12 hours at a time, 15 hours at a time, and all of a sudden you play these bigger tournaments, the mental energy I feel like I'm expending because I'm having to think about so many things that maybe more experienced players are taking for granted.
Right.
The more that I can find things that are just my decisions made in advance, the better. Things like, what am I going to play under the gun +1, under the gun +2, where I'm not, you're staring at ace-9 going, what do I do? I just know what I'm going to do with it. And I think what I'm hearing from you, the 5-10 rule could maybe give some of that as well. Like, oh, geez, do I play my pocket sixes here? I already know that this is 15% of my stack. I'm just going to fold.
Right. And so let's talk about, you bring up another point about when you're first in the pot. Define your hand range from early, middle, and late, just what hand you're going to start with, and I'll just give you a good template. Let's just start you guys off at 10% in early position, top 10% of hands, right? Which is basically ace-8 suited or better, ace-10 off or better, Broadway suited, and probably king-queen.
Yeah.
Okay, just top 10% of hands in early, middle position 20% of hands, and around back 30%.
Mm-hmm.
10, 20, 30. Just do that, And if you're not sure what those are, go on to Poker Cruncher and just slide that little ruler over, and it'll tell you what's 10% of hands, what's 20%, what are 30% hands. And just and set up your standard. Remember I said this is a competition of value and standards? You got to have a standard, first of all.
Right. To be able to me, yeah.
So define that for yourself. You don't have to let me tell. You should define it for yourself. But I'll give those who aren't sure at all, just make it, I only play 10. I open with 10% of hands in early. I open with 20% in the middle, and I open with 30% or more, meaning I'm the first in the pot. And when you're first in the pot, you should always come in with a raise.
Right. And like you said, you can always adjust that as you get more experience, but that's a great place to start.
This works, or I'm too loose. Exactly. So 10, 20, 30. Okay.
So I got one more question for you, and then I want to give you a chance to tell us a little bit more about what you're doing, because we're running out of time, and I hate this. And I know it's not on your side. You said you give us all day, but I know it's our time. We got to get rolling. But the one question we'll have you back on if you're willing. So we'll do this another time too. But one question I really wanted to get at too was, as you play, obviously, and as you watch these final tables and you comment on these final tables, what are those mistakes that you see that are just glaring that you just say, man, this guy is just less experienced, and you sort of see them repeating themselves? Is it playing too many hands, too few hands, too passively, too aggressively? Is it?
Well, you've just listed a lot of them. First is they play too many hands. Amateurs, they generally play too many hands, and the reason is they want to be involved, so they should be involved in the hands that they don't play. That's the secret to not playing hands, is being involved in the hands that you don't play. But play many hands is number one. Number two, their technique is flawed, meaning, for example, we're just watching, and you'll see this even with pros. The guy has kings, and he raises pre-flop, and he gets a single opponent calling, and it comes an ace on the flop. Should he check or bet? If you're the pre-flop raiser and your head's up going into the flop, and an overcard comes to a big pair, proper technique is you should bet like 70 to 80% of the time.
Yeah.
Okay? Because 20 or 30%, sometimes you're going to be trapping, and you're going to want to mix up your play.
Right.
But a lot of players just see, oh, man, every time I have kings and ace flops, and they check, their opponent sees their frustration and their weakness, and they bet, and then they don't even have it.
Right.
So second mistake is they have flawed principles and techniques of approach. So the third then is they show their emotions or their feelings, whether in their body language during the play of a hand. You can tell when a flop hits a person or when they don't, based on their interest level, whether they move forward or back, or you can see it in their forehead, or they're squinching, So for amateurs, the third biggest mistake is you can read them like a book. They might as well tell you what, they check. I missed it. Go ahead, take it.
Of course, an ace came on the flop.
Right? Yeah, of course. This happens. And the hand's not even over yet. And they're telling their person. This is always, Another mistake is they expose their hand without being paid.
Go on. Oh, showing hands.
Have it. They show, hey, look, I have it. If they get bet off the pot, they show. And smart players just see their cards and then replay. Oh, they played this hand from this position.
Right.
So they get a line. So whenever you expose a hand, and some amateurs go, well, I want to get my opponent on tilt. No, you're the one that's on tilt.
Right.
You never get as much value as you give up when you expose your hand without getting paid. So that's a big mistake amateurs make, is they expose their hand without getting paid. Never show your cards ever unless somebody pays to see them.
That's good, and that's an area that I continue to work on. I think I get caught up in the it's kind of a fun like home game kind of thing, and you think, hey, this is fun, and it's such a mistake.
To your call-ins. Anybody who comes in and asks a question on the next one, we'll give it next time I do a show. We're going to give a copy. We'll email them a copy of my list of the top 10 mistakes that amateur players make.
How about because we don't do the show live? How about anybody that tweets and tags you with a question? Would that work? Or we'll do something like that. I want
to connect it to your show rather than me. I want it to connect it to your show. Yeah.
All right. So send in.
But I'll put that out there, and I'll give you something. We'll send it to them. Whatever. However we get it to them. We don't know how we're going to do it, but But that's one thing I'd just like to offer your listeners.
Perfect. Thank you.
Because one of the things that you should be doing is identifying and playing in the best game. And one of the main factors of playing in the best game is identifying the mistakes of your opponents, because playing in a game with weaker opponents, right? So you got to look at a game and see, ooh, he's playing too many hands. Oh, I can tell what he has. Another mistake is their bet sizing is off. You know,
do you normally see it too high, too much, or too little? What's a normal mistake that you see people make?
Normal mistake usually is in bet sizing is that they don't bet enough. Usually,
okay.
They don't size their bets They don't size their bets properly. And then, lastly, another mistake, they just keep rolling off my.
Well, you got a top 10, so
they put too much of a percentage of their stack, especially in cash games. They'll have 200, right? A guy will make a $75 bet, and they'll put 75 of 200, and then the next card they'll throw their hand away.
Right.
You should never be putting in more than a third of your stack and throwing your hand away.
Yeah, I've kind of heard that 30% rule, so that's consistent with what you're saying.
Yeah, you're just giving money away. It's like putting, let's say you're playing out the hand and you started with 200, now you're down to $40, and the guy bakes a river bet and you throw your hand away.
Right.
It's just, so stuff like that is just, you can't overcome.
And so you see that you're immediately
let's get some of your listeners, next time I'm on, maybe they can write in some questions ahead of time. And and then you can present them to me, even though it's not live now. Yeah. And then for everyone that we use, we'll send a copy of the top 10 mistakes players make in a game and what to avoid yourself.
All right, everybody, you heard it. So what we'll do is you submit your questions to Rec Poker, tag us on Twitter or through the Facebook group. If we use your question next time with Kenna James, we'll send you a list of that top 10 mistakes. We'll get it done that way.
With an autographed picture, I'll send you some
photos. Sweet. All right, well, I'm going to be asking a question next time so I get an autographed picture. So
that is great, man. But you know what? He doesn't ask much. Your sidekick just smiles.
No, he knows it all. That's the problem.
I've been waiting. I did want to ask you.
Yeah, I got to get a question for you. We haven't even heard you. You got this beautiful smile and everything.
Oh, great. I've been working on that smile, actually.
Yeah, let me hear the voice. You got a question?
Yeah, I wanted to take you back to that player profile, kind of for fun. What do you see or think others view your player profile as you play? What do you think they're or do you change that purposely? Go ahead. I'm sorry, I missed it.
Dangerous.
What gives them that?
Unpredictable, probably loose aggressive.
Okay.
Plays a lot of hands, plays them aggressively. More than a tight aggressive, probably more loose aggressive.
And do you ever mess with that to purposely change
Absolutely.
that?
I adapt and change it all the time. I being aware of what you're projecting and then realizing which opponents are picking up on that.
Okay.
And flipping the script is what the game is all about, right? So for poker at my level, for me, starts on level 3. What do I think my opponent thinks that I have? It just starts there, and then it goes to 4, 5, and 6. So I like to play against thinking players who are thinking about what I'm doing and then flipping the script on that. So when they're calling me, I have it, and when they're folding, I don't.
And now in the games that we're playing, I'm guessing a lot of tables, there'll be 1, maybe 2 players that are paying attention to that. The rest are kind of playing their cards for the most part. Would you?
I would say more at my level, because at my level, I'm just talking about $1,000 buying tournaments and up, but I play everything. I mean, I don't only play those now. When it's outside of World Series of Poker, I'm playing $200-$300 buying tournaments too.
Okay.
So the higher level buy-ins you go, though, and the higher stakes you go, the more players are profiling and doing psychological tendencies.
Right.
The lower level buy-ins, the lower level cash games, players just aren't up to most of them, like 70%, 60%, just aren't up to. They're just trying to figure out the game themselves, let alone what they're doing, let alone what their opponent is doing. Right. So
that's what
at their level, they're down and in, meaning, okay, I've got to just figure out these chips and these cards and what hands I should be playing. And, let alone forget about what he's doing over there.
Right.
And, there's a guy who's sitting over across the table.
Yeah,
right?
when did he get there?
Yeah, when did he get there? When did you show up? Oh, there's cards out there. Oh, there's a deal. Oh, that dealer, you're the one that dealt me that hand, you son of a gun. So then after you get your own kind of stuff figured out, right? And you're comfortable, you know what your opening hand range is, you know what you're doing this, you know what your bet sizing is, then you can start to loosen up and say, okay, now I can start instead of down and in, I can focus up and out. Who are they? And what are they doing? And how does that relate to my hand? And then you can start real competition, which is, oh, really? You have a big hand? Okay, good. Here's a 3-bet for you. How do you like the slice of this?
How do you like them apples?
I know you like to check your raise with second pair. Here, buddy.
Right.
Here's a raise for you. How do you like your second pair now? So when he check raises and I'm the next guy and I only have jack high, I just put in a 3-bet to him and watch him fold like a cheap suit.
Nice.
I like it.
Anyway, I've loved this time with you guys. It's been awesome.
Yeah, good times, and the time just flew by. I want to make sure we give you a chance here, though. I know you do some coaching. I do some both poker coaching as well as some life coaching, I think. But
yeah,
tell us a little bit about who you are, how people connect with you, and that sort of thing.
Sounds incongruent, but it's really not, because how people live their life a lot of time has a lot to do with how they play the game of poker. It really transfers onto the felt, And so I kind of coordinate both of those and improve the quality, not of their poker game, but of their life. So all in the effort to just improve overall performance, both on and off the felt.
Love it. So how do people connect with you?
If interested, can obviously either go to my website, KennaJames.com. They can Twitter me, private message me. There's all kinds of ways they can ask you about it. There's a contact form on my website to just go and email me and ask for more information. And as far as pricing, it depends. Usually it's very expensive for private one-on-one coaching.
Right.
As much as anywhere from $100 to $200 an hour, depending on what program you're on. But sometimes, I get groups of people and things like that. We can do group sessions and things like that. So they can contact me there for that if they're interested. Other than that, I'm on the HPT. Tune into the Heartland Poker Tour and watch that. And if you're out in Vegas, come by. If you're listeners, I'd love to hear from them. And you can also email me. My personal email is kenna1218@hotmail.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. And I'll put all those link things in our show notes. And if anybody didn't catch that stuff, feel free to get a hold of me, and I'll pass Kenna's information on to you as well. And I know we're going to be airing this in a few weeks, so we won't know how you did in the main event, but hopefully we'll be airing this
I hope so,
and sort of promoting it as a dude at final tables.
Day 2A is today. I'm in day 2 tomorrow, and
how many chips are you taking through?
30,000.
Okay, plenty of chips in this tournament.
I started with 50, so I slid backwards. I was up to about 100K, and I had a really key hand.
Yeah.
The cameras were on and everything. I had raised with ace deuce. How do you play this hand? Do we have time?
we gotta be quick. Give us like a 3-minute deal.
Less than 3 minutes. This is 1 minute. Right. You raise with ace deuce of clubs in middle position. You get 3-bet by the button. Folded back to you. You call. The flop is 6-6-5 with 2 clubs. Your action. What do you do?
What's your chips? How many does he have?
95,000. She has 35,000.
And how much is in the pot at this point?
7,000.
Yeah, well, you know they're going to continue, right? I mean, if you check, they're going to continue. So it's almost
know. We're trying to figure out what you're going to do.
Well, no, that's what I'm trying to think through, though. Like, if I probably don't want to lead into that pot, I guess the question is, maybe I could lead into it. That looks kind of a weird bet, I think. So it's
2 clubs, so you check.
Yeah, I think I check, and then I just have to decide if I'm going to.
Okay, so she checks, you check, and she bets. There's 7,000 in the pot. She bets a standard half-size pot, 3,500. Action back to you.
She's got about 30 behind. Well, I don't know. It's the main event, dude. I don't play 10,000 buy-in, so it's that's where the price point is hard for me. But I think in a in a standard tournament that I play, a weekly tournament, I think with the chip stacks, I think I just ship it there.
Okay, I called.
Okay, so 0 for 1.
So 6-6-5, 2 clubs, 1 spade.
Well, I got figure I probably got 12 outs, right? I probably got, the 9 clubs and the 3 aces. Maybe, the aces may be good. With a paired board, I might get away with a bad kicker.
Right. So I called for value.
Yeah. Okay, for value.
Yeah, well, because I got the flush draw and I got an ace, right? So I've got possibly 12 outs.
Okay, and you could be ahead of her range. I mean, she could be doing this with king, queen.
I don't know if I could be ahead of her range, but I'm just talking about value as far as drawing equity. Value and implied odds.
Gotcha. Yep.
So 6-6-5, 2 clubs, 1 spade, 7 of spades on the turn. Action on you. Now the pot's now 11,000.
Well, I mean,
you're playing the $10,000 main event at the World Series.
Right, I know. That's what you're killing me here, dude. I mean, I think if I call the flop, if I check call the flop, I probably check call the turn.
So you check. She bets 5,500, and she's got about 20,000 left.
Yeah, I mean, I still probably rip it on the flop, but on the turn, I don't know. I mean, you're killing me, dude. Because really, what am I?
Cameras are rolling. You've got everybody watching.
Well, right.
You've got 1 million people watching.
That's why I ripped it on the flop, so I put the decision back on her. I don't want these decisions.
And you're stuttering, and the sweat is coming down the side.
Right. Now I'm tanking. Oh, my God, I'm tanking, and they're looking at me. At that point, I probably just fold the turn.
I shipped it.
As played, I mean, I probably shipped the flop, but if I just check call the flop, and I just don't get there. Now I think my ace could be bad because, I mean, she's there with 8-9. She continues to show aggression. I don't know that my ace is any good.
I shipped it to represent. I mean, I knew the board was wet, but I could filled up there.
You could have 8-9 there with you. Yeah, when you
backed into 8-9.
You call pre-flop, yeah.
So I thought there was a lot of hands. I thought I could
represent.
Plus, it's her whole tournament on the line.
Well, right, exactly. That's why I like the flop chip.
So I'm leveraging. I didn't like the way I played the hand, but I did play it that way. She called me eventually, and she had 2 kings. So I did have an ace or any club.
Okay.
So I had 12 outs, but I whiffed.
Right, but shoot.
I lost 35,000 in a hand, which I didn't really need to do. And,
I mean, you get her to fold ace, king, ace, queen, ace, jack. You get her to fold all those sort of hands. Yep. Yeah.
Anyway, so that was a good way to end. I love to put you on the hot seat.
I love it. It's good for me. I like to ask the questions. I don't like to answer them. So
I know. I noticed that about you.
Yeah. Well, we're going to let you go here. Good luck. Thanks, obviously, guys. Day 2. Hopefully, we can report some good things to our listeners, and we'll have you back on for some more questions.
Great joining you. Enjoy the journey, everybody.
Take care,
Appreciate
Kenna.
it.
Okay, so that's it for today. Thanks once again to Kenna James for your time, to Stacey Nelson for doing that interview with me. Next week, you'll hear from Sherry Bukowski, the author of The Kaizen of Poker, and then we've got a few other interviews coming up. If you want to support us, like us, rate us, review us, follow us, Facebook group us, all of that stuff. If you want to wear a patch, just let me know. All I need is your address, and I'll ship those out to you. There's no cost for that. If you want to rock a Rec Poker hat or shirt or sweatshirt, you can go to floptheworld.com/recpoker. And of course, thanks again to our sponsor, Running Aces Racetrack and Casino. Let's keep this thing going, man. Thanks for all your support and encouragement, and we will chat with you next week.